really thank everybody for logging on. I hope you guys find this a very useful webinar. By the numbers, it looks like most of you guys are in your second year of medical school, which obviously is the perfect time for USMLE Step 1. There's a bunch of people out there who aren't in medical school yet, and I salute you guys for truly being overachievers. Hopefully we'll give you some just general study tips for those of you guys out there. So let's get rolling here, and I hope everybody can hear me okay and see my screen okay. So I'm Sahil Mehta. I work at MedSchoolCoach. I'm the founder of MedSchoolCoach, also program director up at Harvard Med School for the IR Fellowship. And I'm joined today by 4 just awesome sort of USMLE experts. These guys tutor for us. These guys have taken USMLE. These guys have crushed the USMLE. And so they know everything about the test. Now, I myself am probably 10, 15 years away from the test. So it's been a little bit of time since I've taken it. But I think these other guys who are here are going to be able to give the rest of you guys some great strategy to approach this test. So I'm just going to unmute all our panelists just to quickly say hi and allow them to just share a little bit about themselves. Andrew, why don't I start with you? Let me try to unmute you here. I can't unmute Andrew, actually. Let me start with Nikki. Nikki, I'm going to start with you, unmute you. You want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Hey everyone, my name is Nikhil Shah. I am a third year at St. George's University, currently rotating in North Jersey.
Awesome, thanks. And Charles?
Hey everyone, my name is Charles. I'm on my research year. I finished my first 3 years at Duke and I'm taking some extra time to do some clinical research.
Awesome, and let's go with Nidhi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nidhi Ravishankar, and I'm a third-year medical student. I'm currently doing electives in Chicago.
Great. And Andrew, are you there? Are you able to chime in? Oh, Andrew turned into a dog. Interesting. So Andrew, we'll work on your audio and make sure that you're able to chime in a little bit here. But anyway, for the rest of you guys, thanks so much for joining us today. So what we're going to do really today is really get you guys getting ready for this USMLE test, this sort of mod-server test that you guys have coming up, and making sure that you guys are ready to score high. And we sent out a poll, and I want to send out another two quick polls here, just so I can understand where everybody stands in terms of when you guys will be taking the USMLE Step 1, 0 to 6 months, 6 months to a year, or over a year from now. And we'll have some good information for any of those slots. But this will help us target it a little bit better here. Okay, cool. So it looks like a lot of you guys are going to be taking it in the next 6 months or so, which is great. And then a bunch more are going to take it a year from now. And so obviously getting this early exposure to it is really important to understanding the whole process. And for those of you who are taking it much sooner, we're going to go through a lot of tips and tricks, I think, to get you guys ready. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to cover a bunch of different topics, including a general approach to USMLE type questions, the best resources that all our experts think, basically how USMLE Step 1 is used by program directors, and I think this is an important topic, and I'll touch on that. A little bit of study scheduling, how one-on-one tutoring may be able to help you, and then at the end, we're really going to open it up to question and answers. And so I encourage all of you guys to use the question function as you go. Ask questions, and it could be anything. I mean, we're not going to go through, obviously, too many technical details or too many individual problem-solving questions, but ask questions about study schedule, about resources, about what these guys did, you know, how much they slept during their Step 1 study time, how long they studied for. Any of those types of questions are fair game. So feel free to ask them, and then we'll have everybody sort of chime in with their answers at the end. So utilize that question and answer function on the GoToWebinar. So let's get started, right? So USMLE Step 1, the basics, right? A 280 question test, 40 blocks per question. You have approximately 90 seconds per question to answer, and all the questions are worth the same exact number of points. There's no penalty for guessing. I think a lot of you guys, or almost all of you guys, probably know these very basics. And you kind of also know the pass-fail mark. And obviously, passing is very important. If you don't pass, you can't sit for the next, or you can't really become licensed to practice. And so obviously, passing is extremely important. But more so than just passing, scoring high is obviously really, really important. You know, most of you guys know that you can only take this test once if you pass it. If you fail it, you can take it again. But if you take it once, you get your passing score, and you are what you are. And that, in a lot of ways, is a lot of pressure. In fact, I think it's more pressure than even like the MCAT, which you all have taken, because you can really only take it once. And because your score on this really determines, you know, what you can match into from a residency perspective, right? It really determines where you can go, if you can match, and what you can match into. So before we go any further, I just want to launch one more quick poll to understand where you guys are at medical school, for those of you guys that are at medical school, so we get a better understanding of where everybody's at. Okay, cool. So it looks like most of you guys in the States, a bunch of you guys are down either in the Caribbean or other international med schools, which is perfect. Obviously, all this information is applicable to everybody. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you guys about how a program director looks at USMLE Step 1 scores, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you all know that the USMLE is an important factor in the residency process. But I think some people actually underestimate just how important it is, especially as we sift through hundreds of applications for a residency that maybe has 20 spots or 30 spots altogether across 5 years. In an individual year, you know, internal medicine residency may have 20 spots, but an orthopedic residency may only have 3 spots, and a dermatology residency may only have 1 spot, right? So how do we use this? So when I sit down and look at somebody's ERAS application, which is their application to get into residency, obviously I look at the personal statement, the dean's letter, letters of recommendation, honors of publications, research, and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, that's all important. But none of these things I just mentioned here are filterable. And that's so important, because when you have a list of a few hundred applicants, there is a huge tendency to want to filter that list in some way, to really either shift down on the amount of applicants that you really truly have to look at in depth, or be able to sort through one or the other, right? It's very hard for me to personally compare two people's personal statements and say, well, candidate A is better because they wrote a better personal statement, or candidate A has better letters of recommendation. It's very difficult to do that, but it's very easy to do that with your USMLE Step 1 score. And so this is just for you guys a quick glance at what it looks like from a program director's point of view when they look at the ERAS application. And you can see what I've done here is very simply sorted by score. And then I'm able to see everybody's Step 1 score and sort down. And so oftentimes, as unfortunate as it sounds, this is my very first pass. I want to maximize the amount of time I spend, obviously, looking at the people near the top of the list and people with scores in the low 200s to high 100s. I'm going to spend a lot less time looking at. So just an extremely important test in the whole scheme of things. And so really take it importantly, right? Put your all into the studying for it. Make sure that you're really devoting yourself to it. So that's just a quick take on how a program director looks at it. Now I really want to get into, what is it that an individual student may be able to do to maximize their score? What resources do they use? How can they do it? And so I'm actually going to turn it over to Nikki first, who's going to take us through a few different things: his daily study schedule, how he uses QBank, examples of the study guide, and how to use those NBME tests. So Nikki, why don't you take it away?
All right, everyone. Again, thanks for having me. All right, so let's talk about a little bit like a study schedule, first of all. So again, some of you are kind of free-formers, right? You kind of just take the day as it goes and plug in different resources when it feels right. I myself are a little bit more, I need some structure to my day. So I kind of planned a loose schedule, about an 8 a.m. till about a 9 p.m. schedule. And again, if you notice, still get that 8 hours of sleep at night. So completely doable. So in the morning, I like to start with 1 to 2 blocks of U World. And for those of you taking your test at 8 a.m. or, if it's not scheduled yet, most of the testing times are in the morning. So you kind of want to get into that habit of just doing questions in the morning, getting up and getting your head in the right place. So, just 1 or 2 blocks timed and all subjects. So again, at the beginning of your studying, your dedicated study time, you might get a little disheartened because, you haven't reviewed many things, and these mixed blocks, you might get a bunch of subjects that you're not very strong at, and your percentages might reflect that. And my first piece of advice to you is keep your head up and keep going, because the more you review, the more these questions are going to seem familiar to you. And then that's when you really start your learning process. And the key thing, back 1 slide again. The key thing after these UWorld blocks would be reviewing the blocks, and I'll tell you how to do that in a little bit. Second, in the afternoon is the organ system. That's the bulk of your studying, right? Everything revolves around some kind of organ system, whether it's cardio, respiratory, repro, things like that. And that is when you use your resources, first aid, BRS, and boards and beyond, for me at least. And, this is just basically centralizing your studying to one thing. So I annotated from BRS, from boards and beyond into my first aid. And I kind of use that as my centralized source to reference throughout. And then nighttime was for more of the repetition studying. So for those of you who are still either not in med school or in MS1, repetition is the name of the game, right? And everyone who's in year 2 or 3 definitely know that by now. So subjects like biochem and micro, I feel like I often forgot very quickly because of just the little details involved in these subjects. So, every night I'd spend 1 hour in biochem and 1 hour in micro, and I'd kind of split it up. So Monday would be gluconeogenesis and glycolysis for biochem, and then Monday would be my gram-positive day for micro. And then each subsequent day would be, gram-negatives for micro, then fungi for micro. So I have a constant rotation going throughout my weeks of dedicated studying, and I felt like that is a very good way to maintain this repetition. So let's move on to using the QBank, specifically UWorld in my case. So again, you're doing these blocks every morning, right? Or you're doing these blocks at night. It's very tough to review all these wrong answers and really get in-depth studying time. So I basically used a triage system to decide what questions I really want to spend time on reviewing, especially the ones I got wrong, and which ones I could, get away with being confident that, if I get this question again, I could potentially get it right. So I used a 3-point ranking system for reviewing my wrong answers. I ranked questions a 1 if I really had no clue what the right answer was. So pretty much a shot in the dark. And those are the questions I reviewed every single explanation, every single answer choice, and everything about that question. I ranked a question a 2 if I knew what they were talking about, but kind of got stuck between 2 or 3 answers. And in that case, I only reviewed the 2 answers I was stuck between, as well as the right answer, to see why was that right answer better than the one that I picked. And I ranked a question a 3 if, I knew everything what they were talking about in the STEM, in the answer choices, everything was familiar, but I just made a silly mistake, either rushed through it or misread one word. And that I only went over the small summary at the bottom. I think they call it an educational objective at the bottom of UWorld. And I kind of just went over that and trusted my gut that I would get this right on the next go around. And I think that's really key because it cuts down on time that you're, agonizing over every word of every explanation. And, time is of the essence, especially if you're on a, 4 to 6 week dedicated schedule. And from these wrong answers, I made a study guide, or a smart book, some people call it. And I think I have an example of that on the next page. So this is my, an example, a screenshot from my GI study guide. Basically, it was just a 1-word summary of the question that I got wrong and why I got it wrong. So again, for example, C. diff, the type of toxin, and what the toxin does. And, often something in bold was the answer choice that I got wrong or that I chose incorrectly. And this is something I could just review, right before I went to bed or right when I woke up as a quick review from the night before or the day before. And it kind of kept me on my toes, especially it gave me something to review perhaps the last week before my exam if I didn't really feel like doing some hardcore studying leading up to that test. And here we go. All right. So I think this is one of my last slides here. Specifically using the practice test and NBMEs. So again, NBME scores aren't the end-all be-all for your studying, right? These are guidance. These are markers to show you how you're doing, as well as a tool to give you the example of questions they like to ask in these standardized exams. And I'm a big proponent of focusing on your weaknesses. So, everyone who studies what they're good at, you're good at cardio, you study it, it's easy, it makes sense, and it's fun. But the people that truly do well, I believe, are the people who notice their weaknesses and take extra time out of their day to study those weaknesses. So for me, I knew it was, hematology and oncology, as well as repro. And, I made a note on my desktop, a sticky note that said, make sure you study these. And, by the end of my studying time, I made sure that those became my strengths going into test day. So these NBMEs give you a nice score report at the end after you're taking them, and it breaks it down by organ system. So, I hung those up on my wall and kind of tracked my progress throughout to say, okay, Nikki, what do we need to do here? What do we need to sit down and really focus on, especially in those 2 to 3 weeks leading up to the exam? So again, the last piece of advice is focus on your weaknesses, because if you make those your strengths, that's how you really perfect your well balanced approach to test day. And the last thing I mentioned at the bottom there is make sure you try to schedule your NBMEs when you take these practice tests on the actual day of the week you do it. So I took my exam on a Wednesday, so every Wednesday was my practice day. So every Wednesday at 8 a.m. I woke up, took my NBME at 8 a.m. from till noon to kind of get myself in that regimented time of taking this exam, doing the questions, so that every Wednesday felt like test day for me.
Awesome.
And
thanks, Nikki. That's really great. And I really love this study page. I'll just go back to it that Nikki has created here for this like GI study guide. So much of step taking is a lot of like keyword associations, and some kind of study guide like this. I wish I had done this when I took a test. Would simply be like, okay, C. diff, cycloskeleton, right? Like those like little word associations are so important in step studying, and I think that's a great tool for some people to utilize. Quick reminder, if you guys want to get your questions answered at the end, please use the question and answer function, and we'll try to get to as many of them at the end as possible. I'm going to launch another quick poll before we get to Charles, just to understand what resources you guys currently are using out there. And obviously we haven't covered all the resources that are available, but I just want to understand kind of, hey, what do people have out there? Okay, cool. So, a lot, or if not the vast majority of people have first aid. A lot of people have U World or another question bank. Some of the additional sort of newer, I would say, learning modules like Sketching Medical and Picmonics, these things didn't exist when I took the test many years ago, but first aid, believe it or not, has been around forever. And then, of course, there's a plethora of other materials out there. This gives us a good idea. I think people are on the right track with their materials. So I'm going to turn it over to Charles now. So,
Hey everyone. Like Sahil said, I'm Charles. I'm an MS3 Plus at Duke, and I'm going to talk about how I approach Step 1. So the first thing, if we can advance the slide. There we go, how to approach the QBank. So I think UWorld QBank is one of the most valuable resources out there, both in terms of the correct answer and the educational objective at the end, but also in all the wrong answers. So that's one of my tips for you guys, is to be sure that you're using the wrong answers as a resource. Get in the habit of, when you're going through these, of saying, this is not the answer because, and crossing off the list of possible choices. Not only are you learning when you're going through this, you're building a good test taking strategy that helps you get down to the 1 or 2 answers you're considering. And then I know a lot of people become overwhelmed with the amount of material in the QBank. And so if you fall in that category, if you find yourself struggling to stay on the schedule that, as Nikki was talking about, you drafted, that you're trying to stick to because you only have a limited amount of time for Step 1, it's okay to sacrifice low yield UWorld questions. And by that I mean that percentage bar at the bottom of the question that says the number of people who got it correct. If that's you, if you find yourself short on time, I would recommend paying attention to only the questions that the majority of people are getting right? There's no reason to waste an hour studying a question that only 17% of people got correct. So a typical study schedule, I'm an early riser. I like to get up at 5. I'd make sure I was at the library by 6. And I'd like to start with some of the review that I did for yesterday. I really think that, as Nikki was saying, repetition is really the name of the game. So what I would like to do is review those rote memorizing facts from the previous day in the morning of the next day. So I do that for, about 30 minutes, an hour. Then I would spend about 2 hours reviewing first aid. I'd watch a few videos for doctors in training, and I put a note on here to use a timer. I think you need to sit down when you're making your schedule. You need to sit down and be realistic with how much time you can spend on first aid. Take the book, divide it by the number of time you have, and get down to a calculation for minutes per page and use the timer to keep yourself on track. Then for the bulk of my day was spent doing UWorld, and people have different opinions on this, and that's an important point, that there's a plethora of opinions on how to best study. For myself, I found that it was best to use the UWorld in tutor mode. And what I would do is I would do focus review on the blocks that I had just read in first aid. So when I was doing the cardio farm first aid section, I would be doing cardio farm UWorld questions. And I really think it's important to have that temporal feedback right after you're thinking about this topic, to have that feedback of, was I right? Was I wrong? What did I miss? And then review that. You head home, brief workout. It's important to stay healthy, have dinner. Then I would finish up my evening with more UWorld. I would do some sketchy micro and first aid and review again. And the way I did this was I tried to, as Nikki was saying, micro and biochem are just all memorization, and it's important to really take your time and pace yourself with those. And so I did a little bit every day, and then head to bed to get a decent amount of sleep. And then on the week, so my Monday through Saturday, that was my schedule. And then on Sundays, I would do a practice exam every morning. I would review that, and then I would take the rest of the day off, which I recommend having some dedicated rest time during the week. So as I was just talking about, sort of a content plan, how do you tackle the monster of all the material that's going to be on step one? And I really think you need to divide first aid by a goal would be to finish first aid early in your review, either in the first half, first 2/3 of the time that you have left. So take first aid, divide, you guys can all do that, and get how much time you have to finish first aid, and make a schedule for the number of pages you need to do every day. Similar for UWorld, right? Like, this is such a valuable resource. One of the big problems I see people not doing is not finishing all of the UWorld questions. So make sure that you have built a study schedule that allows you to at least finish the QBank once, ideally more than once. Make sure you go back and hit the wrong answers, the flagged questions, and then if you can do it a second time, that'd be even better. Like I said, micro is a beast. Pace yourself, do it continuously throughout your study periods. Same with biochem. Now, practice tests. I think you really need to take a baseline before you start your dedicated study period to see where you're doing. This way, when you take your weekly MBMEs, you know if what you're doing is not working early on, because you should see the topics that you studied in the previous week going up. I would take one baseline every week, and then 2 weeks before the exam. And then, some students like to take a full 8-hour simulated exam. That wasn't my style. 2 weeks before the exam, I hit the score range that I wanted, and I knew that I didn't want to shake my confidence, and just kept going from there. But regular tests are important. Otherwise, you have no clue how you're doing in preparation for step one. And then in regards to sort of reviewing practice tests, I didn't think reviewing, every question on there was important for my preparation. Some people do. I didn't feel like the content that was on there would be something that wouldn't be in UWorld. And so I used it as a way of gauging, hey, how am I doing in cardio? How am I doing in GI? I studied it last week. Okay, my score has improved. Time to move on. Now, sort of what I wish I had known. There are a lot of resources out there, and especially in sort of this digital age, a lot of videos. I would really encourage you to step away from resources that are solely passive learning. So videos explaining things that are just sort of it feels relaxing to watch. Studying is work, and it should feel like it should not feel relaxing when you're going through this. Have a way to relax during these 6 to 8 weeks as you're preparing. Find what works for you and go with it. Similarly, this isn't necessarily the most enjoyable time of your life. I'd recommend, trying to stay away from all those fancy Instagram posts and social media accounts, and just, dedicate your time to step one and get off Facebook. But that being said, make sure that you don't totally go schizoid on your friends and family. Communicate with the people who are important to you. And sort of my last takeaway is, I mentioned I did doctors in training. I think that for me is more of a passive resource, and if I could do it again, I would have sort of gone away with some of those prefabricated educational videos and really gone with questions and discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Charles. That was really great. as Charles mentioned, one of the things that you're going to get is a plethora of advice, right? Everybody's going to give you different advice. Everybody's going to try to throw in, hey, this really worked for me. And part of that is what we're doing on this webinar, right? We're sharing with you what really worked for 3 people who scored in the 99th percentile on their USMLE. Take each and everything that you hear and learn and figure out what works for you, right? And doing that early on, I think, is really important. Taking some time in the first week of your studying and seeing, oh yeah, you know what, I really like those videos, I'm going to use them. Or, I reviewed those videos, but I didn't get anything out of them, forget it, I'm not going to use it. I wouldn't change your study habits, though, too late in the game, as sometimes that leads to a lot of problems. I see a lot of students who all of a sudden become overwhelmed by all the resources that are out there. So stick to a few and really go for it. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Nidhi here in a second. Again, right, guys, remember, use the questions and answers, and we'll get to them at the end. All right, Nidhi, take it away.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mara, for having me, and thanks to everyone for attending. As you know, the step 1 time is probably the most depressing, and it is a lot of work, and you have to really consider this as a 9-to-5 job. And as Nikhil and even Charles said, that you should really be studying as well as taking these practice exams as you would be taking on test day. So if that means that waking up at 7 a.m. and getting everything ready, taking a shower, whatever it is, as soon as you start your day, pretend like you're taking the exam and just go on about it. Go 8 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is. And just try your best to mimic test day as much as possible. And that's really the key to succeeding and not really getting anxious on test day. So when I first started studying for step 1, many people recommended first aid, which was a huge resource. And they also recommended adding stuff onto first aid. But what I really like to do is try kind of creating a master book, because I didn't feel that UWorld and first aid was enough for me to grasp all the concepts. And what I did was I kind of just made a Word document and added stuff from UWorld and first aid. And I also compiled a bunch of notes from whether it was from the questions I was doing in pre-test, BRS, Golgi, Pathoma, whatever it is you use. If you can create a master book, you don't really have the confinements of the margins of first aid or any other sort of restrictions. So I really created a master book, which I thought was super helpful, and it was very, very cohesive, and it really helped me understand and grasp all the concepts from different perspectives. So what I used to do was I started off sort of subject-wise. So as many of my colleagues have mentioned, if you really start off with your weakest subject, you'll be able to dedicate as much time as possible. And at the end, you can kind of review it and understand the concepts a little bit more, memorize if need be, etc. What I did was I kind of just read a subject, whether it be from first aid, Pathoma, Golgi, whatever it is. I read a subject, and then I just watched a video just to kind of get a better understanding. Maybe there's some concepts that I didn't properly understand. I just watched a video, took notes from the video. As Charles mentioned, do not do anything passively. If you're going to study for the step 1, everything has to be active. So even if you are watching a video, try to take notes, try to do something that you will actually gain something by watching the video, and not just kind of looking at a screen and trying to grasp information that way. And I think the major thing that we're all trying to kind of hammer onto you guys is that do questions. Do as many questions as possible. Do questions at the beginning of the day. If you get bored, try to do questions in the middle of the day, and even try to end the day off with a bunch of questions so that you really are able to understand the entire concept and try to understand the question writer's point of view. And that's the main thing about any standardized test, is you have to understand the question writer's point of view. And the only way to do that is to expose yourself with many, many, many questions. And the reason I said, I want you to read and watch videos and do questions is because you really want to break the monotony of studying. You're going to be spending your entire day studying. So if you do the same thing over and over, you are going to get bored, and you are not going to grasp as much information as you want. So it really helps to kind of break the monotony and grasp the concept in very different perspectives. So when I first started, basically I started off with biochemistry, and just a quick example of how my study day my study week went, is I used to read the biochemistry section from the first aid book, and just as a big overview as what concepts do I need to get, what concepts do I need to understand, and then I used to just go over the review book just to understand the first aid concept clearly. Then I used to do 50 questions. Now, these 50 questions don't necessarily have to be from UWorld, but if they are, the better. I used question banks pre-test. I used the Becker question banks and Kaplan. And to be honest, the question banks don't really matter as long as you just do the questions. So I just did 50 questions on the section that I reviewed from first aid and the review book. And then I went over the more common or the important disorders in Golgi. For example, you know that you are going to get questions from relating to cystic fibrosis, HIV, tuberculosis. So when I got to the point in my studying where I had to go over these disorders, I did go over Golgi because it is a little bit more detailed than many of the other review books. So I really wanted to grasp as much information about that disorder as possible. So I went on to Golgi, and then again, as I said, I did more questions. I watched a video in case I was not really grasping the concept or the majority of the concept. And as I said, I just continued to do more questions. So how do you do the questions? So the way to approach the questions is, as my colleagues have mentioned, try to do approximately 1, 2, or 3 blocks a day. UWorld is a very important resource, and it's probably the most important resource that you will have. And you really want to utilize it to the best of your ability. So, you know, I'm sure many of your friends and colleagues have mentioned that they do 6, 7, 8 UWorld blocks a day. That's great for them, but you really want to grasp the concept that's in UWorld. And you're not really using it as an evaluation, but you're trying to learn from the material that's being presented. So try to just break it down, go slow, and go very, very thoroughly with UWorld. With each explanation, what I used to do is, if I got the question wrong, and even sometimes if I got it right, but I got it right by either guessing or just by fluke, I used to refer back to the topic in my master book. And then I used to fill in any missing information that I would get from either UWorld or any of the other question banks that I was doing. And then again, I would go over all the topics discussed at the end of the week, because again, a lot of the times when we start on Monday, for example, biochemistry, and we end on Friday, like microbiology, you are definitely going to forget some of the concepts that you studied on Monday. So it would really help if you did like an overview of your entire week's study material, maybe on Saturday, on Friday, or whatever day works best for everyone. And some of the things I'd wish I'd known is UWorld and just studying, doing questions, everything is very, very time consuming, and it does take up, and it should take up a majority of your day. But I kind of exhausted myself about a month into studying, trying to do it every single day, trying to study every single day without taking any breaks. And what I really thought would have been helpful is that once I started taking maybe a day a week, just to hang out with friends or hang out with family, and just to get away from your desk for a little while, it really helps to bring perspective in your studying. And once you go back, you'll be fresh and you'll be able to grasp the information a lot more. And again, just resonating what my previous colleagues have said, using NBME as a learning resource rather than an evaluative one. Now, what does that mean? It means that you are in a sense using NBME to gather what exactly you're going to get on test day, but it's also about how the questions are being written, how the questions are being evaluated, and what are the topics that need to be focused on during your study time. And again, if you do feel that you're studying as much as you can, and you're not really grasping the concepts or the information as much as you'd like to, or you're not getting the score that you were aiming for, then definitely seek help. And seeking help even after you finished all your studying, it really helps to consolidate your learning, and it really will push you up from, if you're a 220, it will definitely push you up at least 10 to 15 points, because again, it gives you a different perspective on how to approach questions, all these different concepts that you will need in order to do great on test day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Now, as we were preparing this webinar, all the panelists put together a couple of their best resources, and obviously a lot of them overlap substantially. So Nidhi thought that UWorld and First Aid and Golion, and for those of you guys who haven't seen it, that's Golion down there, were great resources. And you know, it's surprising because I used those same resources about 10 years ago when I took the USMLE, and they're still awesome resources, and they're still really good. And you know, Nikki had a similar sort of list, included some of the, I think, more high yield books he thought, including BRS, Physio, Beyond the Boards. And Charles included, I think, a few of sort of the newer versions of things out there, like Sketchy Micro, Doctors in Training, the videos, and obviously everybody used the MDME test. So do any of you guys want to talk just quickly to resources and what you maybe found helpful or least helpful or overwhelming?
So yeah, Nikki here. So obviously, like Charles and everyone else mentioned, there's so many resources, and that's all often the first battle of approaching step one and any other exam in the future. What I recommend often to, you know, either tutorees or just friends who are interested is basically, if you know a resource worked for you in med school or you know, throughout med school, then you should definitely stick to that because it's working for some reason. And now when it comes to studying to study for STEP, you're already familiar with the resource. You know how it works. You know how to navigate. You know, whether it's an online resource or a actual textbook, you know how the chapters work and you're familiar with it. And that in itself can shave off, you know, hours of your studying time if you're familiar with it. So again, if you use Sketchy throughout med school in micro, I recommend using it again in STEP studying. If you use, you know, BRS or any kind of video source, I recommend, you know, implementing it in your studying again, whichever that resource may be.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Nikki said. Your first time using a resource should not be the first time, like your day one of STEP studying. You should have experience. You should know if it works for you prior to your dedicated 6 to 8 weeks of embarking on this.
Yeah, and I think step one studying really begins on day one of medical school. So you should be using all these resources that we've mentioned and whatever you think is useful from day one to use during your courses as you go through basic sciences.
Yeah, definitely. Just one last thing before we move on. The only reason, you know, I plugged in the BRS Physio in there is often a lot of times people didn't feel like they got the necessary preparation throughout MS1 and 2 regarding physio. And physio is, you know, again, one of the big 3 Ps of step one. It is the underlying basis for any pathological disease as well as pharmacological treatment. So I definitely think that physio is a big aspect, and learning it well through STEP can help provide a basis for further studying in pathology and pathophysiology, etc. So again, a very good resource if any of you out there have not heard of it or have not used it yet.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So I'm going to throw out one more poll question out there. And this is obviously a unscientific poll. I know a lot of you guys probably don't even know what you want to go into, but just kind of getting an idea of, hey, what does everybody want to go into out there? Because that determines a lot of how well you need to score on step one, in all honesty, right? If you're a U.S. Applicant, you know, getting into any old internal medicine program is probably not all that hard. Although if you're want to go to Harvard or a great program somewhere, yeah, it's going to be really hard. You're going to need a great score. Whereas if you're coming from overseas and trying to come back into the States, obviously you need a great score sort of no matter where you are. And so, you know, we have a lot of people out there who are interested in internal medicine surgery, but also a lot that look like they're looking towards surgical subspecialties, typically having some pretty intensive step one requirements, derm, optho, rad onc, you know, that field obviously needing really great step one scores to be competitive. And then you have some residencies that sometimes maybe are a little bit less competitive just in terms of their step scores that you need, but obviously the better you do, the more chance you have to match into the program that you are looking for. And so with that, I want to turn it over actually to Andrew, who is our director of tutoring and basically runs our tutoring program at MedSchoolCoach. And he's going to talk a little bit about, you know, strategies for approaching individual questions, and also how maybe one-on-one tutoring can fit into making sure that your score is as high as possible. Andrew, you want to take it away?
Yeah, hey guys, this is Andrew. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself because my audio wasn't working at the start, but I am a resident at UT Southwestern in the internal medicine program, and I did my medical school at UCLA. And I have the opportunity to tell you guys a little bit about how we think that we can help you, and we'll be able to give you some tips on how to approach questions. But I just want to thank all of our previous presenters for sharing their experience. I want to echo a lot of what they said. One of the things that they all said was to make a schedule. That's so important. And it's a marathon. You know, you got to take care of yourself. You're going to have weeks to study for this, and it's a grind, and it's a tough season of your whole medical training, and you really got to take care of yourself. And this whole idea of multiple repetitions and spaced repetitions of each study subject, the body of knowledge that you have to learn for step one is tremendous. But I promise you, once you come out of step one, you'll feel so much more confident in your knowledge and so much more confident in how you feel taking care of patients and seeing disease and thinking about how you're going to manage it. And just the whole like spectrum of knowledge just comes together during the season of step one. So what we'll do here is we'll go through one question, and then I'll be able to explain about how we like to go and approach questions. And this is just one way that I think the one-on-one tutoring is helpful. So this is a question straight from one of the practice exams, one of the NBME exams. The way it's a pretty long question stem. The way that we really recommend is that you read the question first. So it says, sputum cultures will most likely grow which of the following organisms? By reading that, you know the question is going to ask, what's the bug? This way you don't have to think about what's the treatment, how do you diagnose this? So then you look at the options, and you see all these different bugs, right? And you're like, okay, fine. You just glance over that. You know you're looking for a bug. Now you start reading the question. You look and see 53-year-old homeless man with alcoholism. You know automatically that that's a risk factor, right? That means something to this. They wouldn't put that there unless it's something. They're brought to the ER because they were found collapsed and coughing. So collapse and coughing, maybe they're orthostatic. Maybe they have reasons to be coughing, right? Then he appears cachectic. His temperature is elevated. He has a high pulse. You look at these vitals and you think, okay, he probably has an infection, but you actually probably knew that already because you had read the first question. You know the question's asking for a bug. Then it tells you a physical exam. It gives you severe halitosis, missing teeth, dental caries. This is something that should trigger in your mind, okay, this guy has bad oral hygiene. This guy's at a risk for aspiration events, right? Oh, wait, he's also homeless and he also is alcoholic. He's definitely at risk for this. Then they give you the chest exam, and this is helpful to know, right? It gives you fremitus, dullness to percussion, and gives you a chest exam. You might not even need to know that. It tells you he has a white count. And then what's very important at the very end of right before the question, it says there's gross purulence, gram-positive cocci, and gram-negative bacilli. And by knowing this, you're saying, okay, now I don't think one single bug actually can grow out both gram-positive cocci and gram-negative rods. So then you look at the answer choices again, and you see you've got chlamydia pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenza, mycoplasma pneumonia, and strep pyogenes. And these are all individual organisms. So you automatically know normal oral flora. And everything in this question points to that. But it's the way that you frame the question, the way you read it helps you understand, all right, how do I actually, how can I pinpoint the question and pinpoint the answer that I'm really looking for? So this is a little bit of what we were talking about. You want to read the last sentence of each question. You want to look at the answer choices. You want to read the question stem. Then you want to identify the key components, and then you have to look at the answer. We super recommend that you do process of elimination because this way you don't have to second guess yourself. And it sounds silly, but every single test I've taken, I always go through all of the questions that I click, and I see that I clicked the wrong answer once. You know, it sounds like a silly thing. You just want to make sure, even if you know it, you definitely want to get credit for it. So the path to success, I think step one is a very important part of your learning. It's a really important part of your training. I know it feels like a burden and a big task, but having this foundation is super important. And I think having an individualized tutoring session with one of our specialized tutors has been proven to be very, very effective. It's helpful because we talk about how we wish we knew our weaknesses, you know, and we have these blind spots that we can't identify by ourselves. But if someone's asking us questions, we realize we have blind spots we didn't even know about. What's super helpful in our study sessions is that we ask a lot of questions to our students. You know, we ask, hey, so what's the association with current jelly sputum, you know, or what's the association with this particular risk factor? And if you don't know it, that's an opportunity for us to plug that gap of knowledge. I think it's very hard when you're studying on your own to think, you know, I actually don't know what current jelly sputum is, you know, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think having one-on-one tutoring offers an opportunity for us to find those periods, those areas, and help you get strong on your weaknesses. Like we said, a study schedule is incredibly important, and practice questions. Everyone has repeated, and I'll repeat it. You got to do questions, 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 and questions, and then more questions. I wish I could tell you that it ends, that you only have to do questions for step 1, but you have to do it for step 2, and you took step 3, you have to do it for step 3, and then you're going to have your board exams to get your board certification. You have to do it for that too. So get ready, because questions are not really going to end anytime in the near future, but if you get good at them now, it'll make the rest of your training a lot easier. And then you just got to repeat, 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 and then eventually we'll get you the test date and you're going to crush it. So again, with our one-on-one sessions, we personalize it to every single person. That means we have no set curriculum that we are going to give to you. It's anything that you need, we can help you with. That means if you need a schedule, we can help you with that. If you need someone to walk you through how to spend your time, we can walk you through that. If you need somebody to explain a pathophysiology of heart failure, we can do that. If you want somebody to teach you high yield associations and make sure you know it, we can also do that. And if you need someone to walk through questions, we can do that. So we have incredible teachers. All of the people that we have here have scored in the top percentile of their exam, and they're excellent. They've got incredible experience, and everyone has a good time with them. By having a session that's focused for you and that forces you to have active learning, you're going to learn quicker than you would by yourself, and we'll be able to find the weaknesses that you have and be able to fill those. And by filling those, you get to see that you'll develop more and more confidence, you'll get more questions right, and your scores will increase. An important part of what we believe in at MedSchoolCoach is that we have to have active learning and spaced repetition, meaning at the beginning of every session, we offer the ability to do refresher sessions to talk about what we talked about in previous sessions. At the end of every session, we do teach back sessions to make sure what we explain is something that you understand and that you can explain it back to me. And in doing that, we guarantee that it consolidates that into your brain. So the way that we pair our tutors, it's based on their availability and your needs. If you say, I really need help with biochemistry, we do our best to pair you up with somebody who's very strong at biochemistry. And then again, we talk about the different types of sessions. We can do sessions based on a particular pathophysiology or particular topic. We can do sessions where we just go through associations or make sure you really know what it is. On the wards, you might have known this as pimping, but it's actually a very safe environment with us. We're not mad, we're here to support you, unlike maybe what you might have experienced on the wards. Or we just go through questions, and any mix of what you prefer, we're here for you. And we've shown that with one-on-one tutoring, some of our students have increased by as many as 40 points. And that's incredible feat, and it's a testament to how hard our students work and how good our tutors are. And so we have these guarantees that compared to our competitors are probably a little bit stronger than what they have. In terms of our satisfaction guarantee, if you're not satisfied with your products, we are happy to refund you for all the unused time. And that's, we've not had people actually cash this in. And then this is the score increase guarantee is not something I've seen in our competitors. It's if your NBME practice score does not increase by over 10 points over the time that you have worked with us, we'll give you an extra 10 hours for free. And again, none of our students has ever needed this because all of our students have improved by over 10 points.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. So this is, that was great. A nice overview of what we can provide you guys. Not everybody needs one-on-one tutoring, obviously. It's not for everybody. Not everybody needs it. But there definitely are a huge swath of people who could benefit from it. And that goes from people who are struggling to do well on struggling to just get to a passing score on the test, all the way up to those people who maybe already scored a 240, but know they need a 250, to get into the residency of their choice. And really that entire spectrum is somebody who could be helped by sort of focused in, comprehensive, tailored approach studying, as opposed to sort of the shotgun approach where you throw a whole bunch of stuff at somebody or just watch a whole bunch of videos. We really feel like the time is better utilized to sit down and structure your plan and structure your study habits and study schedule and lesson with one of our tutors. So I really, again, want to thank everybody who's presented and also everybody who's logged in for hopefully learning a little something from each and every one of our tutors and experts. And now I want to sort of turn it over to what I think is usually the funnest part of these webinars, where you guys out there in the audience can ask questions. And this is a chance for the next few minutes here to be able to ask whatever questions you want. And basically, I'll just moderate and throw questions at some of our experts on the panel here and see what their take is, and we'll go from there. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Here's an interesting question for those who are further away, and Charles, maybe I'll start with you. Britt out there asks, what tips do you have for somebody going into medical school this fall? So I guess this kind of goes for people who are, a year plus away from studying for step one, but know how important it is. What's the best way to sort of get prepared for it?
Right. So one of the problems with step one is that it's this national, international test that everyone has a variable curriculum at medical school. And so really understanding what's on the test at the beginning of medical school is to your benefit. I recommend your first day there, you get a copy of the most recent first aid. Go to Kinko's, FedEx, have the binding taken off, put it into a binder, and annotate that throughout your first few years of school leading up to step one. And that way, when you get to step one, you have this customized book of all these topics and hints that you've acquired throughout medical school. So use first aid, and then also get in the habit, like Nidhi said, of using UWorld, doing questions early on. There's no reason why you can't be using the QBanks throughout first, second year of medical school.
Awesome, thanks. Let me throw this question at Nikhil. So Nikki, this person asks, do you recommend using first aid during MS1 based on the different blocks you're competing? And Charles just gave his answer to this question. I assume you have a similar answer, but let me just hear what you have to say.
So yeah, actually that's a great question, and I know people have different takes on it, as we heard Charles's. So from a personal take, I actually didn't start using it until MS2 actually, and the reason for that is I don't think you get a full appreciation yet, and again, curriculums are different. Until you get into the pathological so your path course really covers these organ systems in depth, and until you get a full appreciation of that, I didn't feel it was warranted that I start annotating first aid just at that moment. But again, as soon as you finish that biochem course or that anatomy course, it can never hurt to go back and see, okay, I learned all this detail from my class in school. Let's see how much of it I have to retain, moving forward. And how much of it is in this first aid book that I can either review over summer break or just keep current on.
Cool. Nidhi, here's a question from Nimra out there. She says, how would you recommend recovering if you fall behind on your schedule?
So that's a great question. Again, as I mentioned, you really need to set a schedule where you have one day to review all of your information that you've studied during the week. So for example, if you set your study schedule from Monday to Friday, for example, try to take at least one day to review all the information that you've done Monday to Friday. And with that being said, if you do fall back from, if you fall back doing one block Monday versus you doing like 2 blocks Tuesday, it would really help having that review day to go through the stuff that you may have missed. And if you had taken that break day, again, you could also be using the middle or the beginning of the day just to go over some of the stuff that you really want to get caught up. But again, as everyone has mentioned, it's really a marathon, and you really should be spending more time on the quality of the information that you're taking versus sticking to too stringent of a schedule. A schedule is good when you're trying to organize your information, but again, try to really learn the information as much as possible.
Awesome. Andrew, here's a question out there that says, is there any correlation between MCAT and USMLE scores?
So what I understand now is that they've been taking the questions that USMLE has changed a little bit. Now the new MCAT has the questions that they take from there now correlate to how well you do on STEP. So there is a correlation between how you do on the MCAT and how you do on USMLE 1.
Cool. Andrew, Charles, if you're still out there, here's a question from William, which I think is a good question. It basically says, everybody's using the same resources. What factors do you think put students over that 250 threshold?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, like you said, students are using the same resources. In terms of getting over that 250 threshold, one of the traps, a few of the mistakes that I see many of my students that I tutor make is that they memorize words in first aid without understanding the meaning behind them. They don't actually, and that sort of gets at the core of it, they don't understand the content they're learning, they're just memorizing it. And that's where I think those few extra, steps taken to make sure that you understand what exactly you're learning, because the test isn't going to ask you about the way it's presented in first aid. It's going to take that knowledge and twist it into a way you haven't seen before. And so it's like you have to really have a deep understanding of that. And that's my opinion of what causes people to get above a 250 versus in the 230s.
Awesome, thank you. Nikhil, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but the Jade asks, does first aid change every year? I want to start preparing for the USMLE a year from now. Can I start preparing with the first aid book from last year?
So again, so first aid has been used, for many years now. I think there's a copy I found in the hospital that's from early 80s or so too. So this is a long-standing text here. So it's kind of like asking the question, does medicine change a lot? And as technology goes, it obviously does. But the book stays the same. The core concepts are the same, and they might change a couple of pictures or diagrams or CT scans here and there. But again, the root of the material is the same. So if you're looking for that really current mnemonic that they might have just added, last year, then great. Get the newest book. And again, it doesn't hurt to have the current year while you're in MS 1 and 2, and then once you start studying for the hard, first step dedicated time, you can get the new one if if that's really what would please you. But again, core concepts stay the same. Little details, little mnemonics may change, may vary.
Cool. Nidhi, there's a question out there that basically says, do you have any specific advice for somebody who's coming from an international school in terms of studying?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm also from an international school, and the thing with basic science is because it is such a compressed compressed schedule. Basically, the 2 years is being compressed into about 16 or 20 months for some of them. A really helpful thing to remember is that try to use the resources from step 1 and from day 1. And this means basically getting whether it's a 1-year subscription to UWorld, whether it's a 3-year subscription to UWorld, whatever it is, if you can use all the resources that you think will be helpful and that we've all mentioned to you starting from day 1, it will really help not only in your courses, but again, as you start studying as you have your dedicated study time, it's not going to be something completely new, and you'll be able to get all and fill all the gaps of the information that you may have missed through all of your courses in basic sciences.
Awesome, thanks. Andrew, there's a question from Diana out there that says, what is the best way to build a study schedule in concurrently with classes?
That's a really good question, because some schools will not teach their curriculum to step 1 while others do. So it depends a little bit on your school. So I know UC San Diego is one of the schools that might focus entirely their schedule on the step, while other schools might not. I think we've had the opportunity to partner with a company called Cram Fighter, and that's been an awesome opportunity. They have a great app that helps us help students basically create a great schedule. I think the focus is to do well on your curriculum, but maybe not too well, so that you sacrifice the time to study for step 1. But that being said, you don't want to burn out, right? This is a marathon. I don't want you to, if your test is 18 months away and you're going like 16 hours a day studying for step 1, I think that might be a little overkill. So I think there's an adequate balance. You want to do well on your curriculum so that you don't get any sort of problems like with the exam, but you also want to be able to save some time and energy to study for step one because it's a long process.
Awesome. Nikki, there's a question about taking USMLE after third year versus after second year. Any thoughts on that?
So again, actually, this is a very debatable topic because a lot of schools actually allow, I'm not sure specifically which ones, but they allow, you to take it midway through third year or at the end of third year. And again, it differs, right? So, third year, you get a lot of clinical experience, in-hospital experience. So you're day-to-day working with imaging studies, working with diagnoses and pharmacology, and learning the ins and outs of the hospital. And this can be a big plus, especially giving, this step one basic science material, putting it in perspective, and maybe, learning it in a clinical setting might prolong your retention. However, I've also found there's been some deficits as far as clinical knowledge versus the basic science knowledge, and the fact that something you might do in hospital or in that certain, in the order you do it in might be different than what they want you to know for step. So, sometimes, and you'll hear doctors say this a lot, especially in the hospital, is that something that you do in, and when you're seeing patients is not exactly what you should be doing based on the textbook definition or based on the testing definition. So there's definitely pluses and minuses. I think it's just very based on, how much do you want this material in perspective from a clinical setting.
If I can jump in on that, I have a perspective on that as well. So you see, my medical school, we did step one before we started clinicals, and where I'm doing residency, they start clinicals before they take step one. And there's just exactly like Nikhil said, that there's a big difference in maybe how you are able to retain the material just because you've seen patients. But sometimes clinically, what you might end up finding is that you might not know as much because you haven't had that dedicated study time to compress all the material into your brain. So as your performance on the wards might be a little bit subpar just because you didn't study that mechanism of, hydroxyurea. So there's a balance. You can go either way. You can skew it either way, I think.
Sahil, I have a question for you. So, you can filter by step scores and sort of, making this decision of step before the wards or after the wards. Can you filter as a residency director by clinical performance?
You cannot. So there's no filter for clinical performance, and that's sort of the unfortunate thing about the way that we are able to synthesize information on ERAS is that very simply all you have is the things that are data inputable. And so somebody's clinical grades are not inputable across the board, right? So you have your dean's letter from a particular school that you can look at, but that's actually a PDF that's attached to the application. So you got to open it up, and then you got to go down and you got to read, sort of what their score is. So it's like a 7-click process. And then even then, you only kind of get that one person snapshot. You're not getting it compared up against anybody else. And believe it or not, dean's letters across different schools are just very different, right? So what's an honors at Duke may be very different than what's a high honors at Harvard versus an honors at SGU. It's a completely different system across the board. So really the only things that are filterable are your USMLE scores. And that's part of why it goes back to being such a important part of the whole process.
And so I'll have one more question for you. For people who might have already taken step one and are looking for study tips for step two, how does step two weigh with respect to step one when you're looking at the applications?
Yeah, so, and that's a great question because there's a few people out there who've asked that same question, right? So if you bomb step one or you don't do as well as you wanted to do on step one, are all your hopes lost? And the answer is, of course, no, right? Your hopes are not all lost. You just have to do really well on step two or somehow make a great impression in, let's say, an away rotation at a particular program. So the way let's say I don't know you as an applicant because you haven't done an away rotation, but I see a step one score of 213 and I see a step two score of 266. At that point, now I'm thinking, okay, there's a significant discrepancy here. Let me dig a little bit deeper. Wow, you know what? This person got all honors in all their clinical rotations and they got 266 on step 2 CK and they have great letters of recommendation. I'm going to bet that this person just had a really bad day on step one. Maybe they just had a really bad couple of months leading up to it. Who knows what it was? This person is somebody I want to interview. Conversely, if you have a tremendous step one score and all of a sudden I see your step 2 score being really poor, that might tell me that you're lazy, or, you know, sort of rested on your laurels, so to speak, and just didn't want to or didn't need to perform as well, so kind of backed off. And it's okay to obviously drop your score a little bit. Nobody needs to score a 260 on every single step test. But at the same time, you know, that big discrepancy in the downward function can really hurt. The bottom line is, if you don't score as well as you want on step 1, there's still a chance, and you still have the opportunity to do better. Your step 2 score can overcome your step 1 score in a lot of ways. Here's a Nidhi, I'll ask you this question. Somebody's asking about flashcards. A lot of actually people are asking about flashcards, and Anki or Anki, I don't even know how to pronounce it, which I think Charles brought up. Did you use flashcards or some kind of program during your study?
So I actually did not use flashcards for my step 1 studying. However, I think they are pretty useful just to kind of get those juices flowing. So if you kind of, at the beginning of the day, you know, you don't really have enough energy to go through questions, and as you know, you really need to focus when you do your world questions. I think flashcards are a good way to at least start your day, start your learning, and they can also be very helpful at the end of the day, just to again consolidate all your learning. You know, when you're a little bit tired, at least to just, you know, get some very flash facts that could be helpful for you.
Cool. Charles, there's a question out there that basically is asking sketchy micro versus Picmonic, or sorry, sketchy versus Picmonic. I'll just say versus other things that are out there for microbiology and those I guess the high memorization topics. Is there anything that you recommend, or any one particular thing that you found more helpful than another?
You know, I had never used Picmonic or the other ones out there. Sketchy was what I went through. And, you know, so there are going to be new resources that come along every year. I found that Sketchy, and in a combination with First Aid, really worked for me. And that's what I use, and that's what I invite my students to use.
Awesome. Andrew, there's a simple question that says, how do we recruit our STEP tutors?
Yeah, so we've had tutors from all of the top programs. We have some tutors from UCSF, some tutors from Harvard. The way that we've typically done it is by word of mouth, and by doing a little bit of advertising. But we are open for any tutors who have done very well on the exam and who love to teach.
Yeah, and I'll throw out there, you know, one thing that we really look for in all of our tutors is that not just the ability to do really well on the exam. I think a lot of people have that ability and do very well, but you have to have done really well and really have a true passion for teaching and a true, I would say, aptitude for explaining difficult concepts to people. And that's really part of why I think our tutors get such great results, is that they're not just really good at the material, they're not just really good at making a schedule, but they are really, really, really good at honing in on what somebody is weak at and helping them sort of work through that. So with that, you know, I think what we'll do is probably end the webinar right here. It's a little over an hour now. I really hope that this was helpful for all you guys out there. I know that there's additional questions that have sort of lingered, but a couple of different ways that you can get some answers. Shoot us an email, visit our website, MedSchoolCoach.com. You can email info@MedSchoolCoach.com if you want more information about our tutoring program. I think we can really help a lot of people out there. We'll shoot you an email about how you can get a copy of this webinar, which I know a lot of people are probably interested in, and hopefully we can help you. Good luck, everybody out there who's taking the test in the next 6 months. You guys are all going to do awesome. You know, study really hard, incorporate a lot of the topics that our tutors and experts here are giving you, and I think you'll really knock it out of the park. And again, if you need that extra help, we're here for you. So thank you again to Andrew, Charles, Nikki, and Nidhi. You guys were awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I know everybody on the webinar appreciates you taking the time as well. So good night, everybody, and you'll get an email in a little bit, sort of recapping and telling you how to get a copy of the webinar.